And with that, I would hand over to Dominik. Dominik, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Krenar. Here.
Dominik, your audio is not very good, actually.
Is it better now? Come back? Let's not come back. Does it come back now?
Yes.
Okay, so hi from my side. My name is Dominik Wittenbeck. I'm Group CTO of S&P, one of the members of the Selective Data Transition engagement, and I'm here together today with Patrick Wingartz and Stefano Castiglioni from Natuvion and SAP to present to you the Selective Data Transition. How does it actually technically work? I myself, I'm for 20 years plus in the industry right now, so I hope I can give you a good overview and maybe hand it over to a very short introduction to Stefano.
Yeah, I'm Stefano Castiglioni. I'm working in SAP since 2007. I'm from the MLT department, and my role in SAP is a practice director in transition services.
And Patrick, maybe a couple of words about yourself.
Yes, thank you, Dominik. So my name is Patrick Wingartz. I'm from Natuvion, working almost for 9 years now for Natuvion in the transformation department as senior architect and also part of the SDT community, and also a warm welcome from my side here, and handing back over to Dominik.
All right. So I think this session has been quite awaited. At least we had a couple of carryovers from previous sessions about the selective data transition. So besides the disclaimer, and we try not to make any forward-looking statements right here, but tell you the ground truth of what basically SDT is capable of and how does it actually work, let's quickly dive into what will be the topics today. We will quickly go over, well, maybe not as quickly, but this is rather an in-depth session today, go over the system creation, that is a core part of the SDT practice, then go over the dual maintenance and retrofit perspectives that basically need to be taken into account, then actually deep dive into the hearts of the selective data transition, which is the data migration, basically, and finally go into downtime and performance considerations. I also invite you guys all to use the chat or use the Q&A panel to post in your questions. We as speakers will try to answer them as best as possible. And of course, we will have a Q&A session in the end to answer them live and in color for you guys. All right. So without further ado, let's dive into the first topic. We will be talking about the system creation for selective data transition, basically. We have overall basically 3 to 4 scenarios that we'll be covering. And I guess, Patrick, you will be taking the lead here later on when it goes about the how does it actually work. We will be talking about shell creation, which is mainly a metaphor used or a methodology used when you want to reuse existing configuration and only innovate selectively, right? In that sense, it is somewhat a little bit close to a conversion, at least it may seem so at the very beginning. And it's meant for all of those customers who already, invested a lot in their existing ERP landscape to configure it, to do custom development, and to do all sorts of configuration that differentiate you from the market. Next, we will go over the mix and match approach, which goes a little bit more towards the direction of retain legacy data, but also embrace more new functionality to a larger extent that the shell creation would typically do. All the way over to the new implementation, where you basically start from the ground up with a fresh implementation. And then later on, SDT will be there to basically bring your legacy data over and move them into the new format that you basically decide for how your process should work going forward. And a little bit of a sidecar, because it's not exactly sticking to these scenarios right here, but it comes up a lot, is the existing system scenario. Because specifically with larger customers, what we see quite a lot is that we have wave-based approaches going on. And basically, the existing system will, of course, be new and fresh for the first wave, but going on for waves coming up and in consolidations, of course, this system is already pre-existing. So that's also something like a special situation that SDT can very well cope with. Then we will dive into the dual maintenance, into the retrofit. I guess Stefano will give you a good oversight about what this basically is about and how to deal with this. The main issue or the main problem statement that we basically have right here is that while your migration project is basically going on, of course, your business doesn't stop working. They don't stop innovating or changing processes and configuration and setup in their existing ERP system landscape. So, of course, you have to make sure that both those system landscapes basically stay in touch and basically aligned very well. So you're not going to implement basically long-running freezes and so on and so forth. Then next, we will go over the heart of SDT, which is the actual data migration. And while this picture might seem very intimidating, we're going to walk you through the very individual steps and also about the procedures that we have at hand and that we have available in the SDT Selective Data Transition approach that allow you both to bring over historical data, do changes on the fly, to adapt to a new configuration, to adapt to a new process setup or a new system template that you want to set up on the target system side. Finally, we will take a couple of considerations about downtime and performance, because these are very important topics for the customers I've been seeing in the last 10, 15 years, and even increasing over time. Because business continuity is one of the major concerns around, of course, with change management and all the other things that go alongside with such a project, basically, or such a program. Performance considerations in terms of making sure the business works as long as possible is one of the utmost things that you typically, as customers, do care about. So we will be talking about what data volumes, what role do data volumes play? How does the complexity of the migration play into this thing, or the choosing of the migration method? What's the end-to-end hardware environment? How does that influence the overall picture? And also the organization. And finally, of course, a couple of tuning measures. Okay, so now we have a good idea about the overall scope of what we're going to cover today. So this is where I actually would toss over the first question over to Patrick in regards to the specific approaches, how to create new systems in the SDT approach.
Yes, thanks, Dominik. So when we are talking about how to create our target system, we basically have three different scenarios, as Dominik already mentioned, to consider here. And the first one, which is also the most important one from our today perspective, is the shell approach. So starting with our current ECC productive environment, we are basically creating a shell based on exactly this environment as a one-to-one copy containing all customizing and repository data. But the main difference is here that we do not have any master and transactional data here inside. So the system is quite small, and as you can see here, the client-dependent data is empty, and we have here the ECC shell. So right now we are not yet on the S4 side, but we have here the chance to do all customizing and custom code cleanups, what we want to do here and what fits to the project requirements. And then preparing everything which goes into the direction of the sum, bringing the shell to the S/4HANA data model, including not just the S/4HANA software, of course, but also all the best practice content, having this then in the shell and really being prepared then for the selective data transition. One thing in addition here is that the update or the full conversion of this shell is much simpler and faster, since we are not talking about a full conversion of the whole application data. So just about these shell, and here we then have the chance to do it also not as part of a downtime and doing it upfront and step by step in detail without not a time-sensitive path, let's say. So this is first of all the shell, and afterwards we are ready then for the selective data migration, bringing the data into the system and having this then as well in the test migrations, but of course also in the go live to have then the selective data migration and our migrated data in the target system. The second approach basically is divided into two paths. So the first one, which is not the common one, but of course to mention, is that we have a completely new installation, completely independent of our ECC shell. So we have a fresh installation and are very limited in our customizing transfer here. But here comes the second path inside, what we're calling the mix and match approach, where we are still starting with a fresh installation. So the future S/4HANA target system is a fresh installed system, But here we have the chance with an intermediate S/4HANA system, which is based on our ECC source system, to bring in selective customizing and bringing customizing with transport into our future system. But the main difference is here in comparison to the shell that this is a fresh installation. And our third thing to mention is here that we already have an existing S/4HANA system. So when we are talking about, for example, a wave-based migration or anything like a merge scenario, that we are not starting with a shell or a fresh installation and bringing data on a selective way into an already existing productive environment.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Patrick. Just a little bit about your personal experience and your personal opinion. Which customers would typically change, in your experience, which approach, and what would be the reasons for that?
I think most of our customers are heading into the direction of the shell approach. Since you have your ECC productive environment already for years, you have a lot of customizing, and you do not want to start from the scratch. And the good thing here is that you are still in your ECC shell flexible to coming to some of the standard processes to use and doing simplifications and all that stuff, but starting with your basis scenario and all the customizing you maintain for years and not starting from the scratch. So this is basically what most of our customers are choosing, and which is also the recommended path. Start with your basis, but of course doing alignment and processes back to standard where it makes sense.
Yeah. So basically that approach gives you a lot of flexibility basically in the end, right? To innovate exactly where you want to and where you need to, but basically also, well, keep all of the existing, benefits that you already customized into your system basically from the past, and that you can basically leverage at this point. I can only add from my side a little bit that specifically in larger programs where the target system is actually supposed to come as a system consolidation, where basically the overall program has a metaphor of bringing multiple systems into a single target system. Typically, there is a discovery phase at the beginning where there's a choice being made which one of the systems is most representative for the target system processes. And then basically, of course, over the course of time, as new waves roll in, there is basically a fit to standard, or basically a fit gap analysis always for each wave that is basically rolling in. That's of course for larger programs, right? And specifically larger corporations which want to take this over. That's also something that we're seeing. I know, Stefano, from your end, there would be anything to add to this, or any experience that you want to share?
No, I have a similar experience. Mix and match approach is really getting closer to a greenfield approach where the customer need more innovation. Here, really need the customer to understand how much is the investment they did in the past, how much close is the current environment to their target, and if the transition is the right moment to introduce innovation in the organization.
Okay, perfect. Moving on to the next topic, actually, the retrofit and dual maintenance topic. I mean, building up a shell at the beginning of the project gives us all this flexibility that we just have learned about, but it also comes basically with the obligation to keep the system, the existing ERP system that's running and being developed, basically in sync with the project system that is supposed to be like the future production system. Maybe Stefano, you want to shed a little bit of light on the process, how it works, and what tools basically are available to, well, make the path a little bit easier and consistent.
Yeah. Okay. So you at this stage, we are, as Patrick described, you have created your new instance, your new S/4HANA instance, and you need to keep aligned the current landscape you have in SSC with the new S/4HANA instance, because the migration project will may have a duration of 1 year or 6 months, it depends case by case. And then SAP offer a process called retrofit that could be managed by solution manager, but by sub-solution manager from Cloud ILM, that allow you to keep the two systems in sync. So, and there are 3 levels of automation. The first level is the automatic retrofit. This is done for simple changes that can be automatically imported to the target instance. the tool must know what can be imported, what cannot be imported. And of course, based on the area where you're going to change, is able to recognize if the change can be automatically implemented or not. Then you have a second level that is called tool assisted retrofit, that is allow you for changes with a high level of complexity or where you need some manual operation to do smaller changes to keep in sync the two system. And then the third level is the manual retrofit. So the manual retrofit is for higher complexity where the alignment between the two systems must be done manually. So for example, in area where you have maybe simplification item to be evaluated and to be configured in the target system, and this cannot be done anyway automatically. In this way, you can keep the two systems aligned for the duration of the project and ensure the continuity, the business continuity at the go live. Additionally, in this process, you need to consider that for the cutover period, you need to have a configuration freeze for certain point from certain point of time of the project to guarantee the success of the project and to minimize the risk of the project.
Okay. Are there any particular projects or customer experiences which come to mind where like specific things you would like to highlight in retrofit?
Okay, I think so. I think it is this is connected to the scenario you're going to choose. So for brownfield approaches, so for shared conversion, where you start from the original systems and you create the instance in that is a baseline that is created on the baseline of the original system. The retrofit is a very important tool because allow you to minimize the effort to keep in sync the two systems. For mix and match, of course, typically mix and match projects have a large changes on the configuration. There are parts where you want to innovate, and the part that can be managed by a retrofit is getting smaller, and the manual retrofit part is getting bigger. And then it's depending by the scenario chosen by the customer, how to use the tool. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Thank you very much, Stefano, on this topic of retrofit and dual maintenance. Let's actually step into the heart, and I'm going to probably just like toss it right back to you, because with selective data transition, we have already learned in the past sessions that we have exceptional capabilities available for the migration of historical data, the ability to basically adjust the data on the fly to the new to new configuration. For instance, let's say you are changing your chart of accounts, for instance, and stuff like that, to do data cleansing along the way. So all these capabilities, right, need to of course be fit by specific migration approaches. And maybe Stefano, you want to go a little bit over what migration approaches are there and how they are actually executed and how they actually do come to life.
Yeah, once we have created the system and we guarantee that the customizing of the target instance is in line to what we expect. So we need to consider the migration of the data. So to migrate the data, there are two main technology in use in SDT project. The first one is, let's say, let's get the SDT approach more popular, is the table-based approach. So the table-based approach is a very flexible approach because you can get to granularity at table level and define what you want to migrate. It has a very good throughput, so the performance you can get with this technology is very high. On the other side, during the migration, you need to consider data model changes in order that the data will land in the correct format in the target system. Mm-hmm. The other approach is the posting approach. So is the traditional one. The advantage of the posting approach is that there is a validation of the data at the end of the posting. So the data is automatically validated, but it is not allowing the migration of historical data that the table-based approach is guaranteed. So What you can do in some cases is define the area of the system where you want to move historical data, use the table-based approach, and in area where you want to introduce more innovation and you are not interested to the legacy data, you can use the posting approach. And in some cases we can use both technology and have hybrid approaches.
Yeah, I actually see that also in projects, not quite a lot, right? And many of those basically make a decision about what approach to take. But again, specifically on larger programs, what I personally also see is that we have a hybrid approach, actually, specifically there where application data, specifically when like it's an open item based and balances based migration, is taken over with a posting based approach, while master data, for instance, could be taken over with a table based approach and give you more flexibility in changes of the master data than there. And also specifically in wave-based situations again, and if we're thinking about wave-based situations where it's not a single system, where it's not like multiple systems being consolidated, but maybe a single global instance being spread across multiple waves, because let's say the customer, for instance, is fearing the change management needed for an like Big Bang approach here. Of course, it means that the system goes over in waves, and typically you would use company code clusters or regions basically to move over. And then, of course, specifically for intercompany business or other things, on the existing source system, right, you need to have some clearance of existing documents, because I mean, the project doesn't stop, right, for the or the business doesn't stop for the project here, which is also where the posting-based approach is actually very capable and possible to enable these two approaches, basically. Okay, so anything else, Stefano, that you want to add?
No, you can continue. Thank you, Dominik.
Okay, very good, very good, very good. Okay, I guess we might actually have some time available for validation reconciliation approach at this point, because you mentioned that. Of course, with the posting-based approach, we do get the benefits of having APIs basically doing much of the tasks that basically are at hand. With the table-based approach, this is somehow a little bit missing. But of course, the overall methodology brings back in exactly the things that are needed here for a throughout reconciliation and, assured and consistent bringing over the data. So here, maybe, Patrick, I want to toss it back to you to explain a little bit about how the reconciliation methodology actually works within SDT.
Yes, sure. Thanks, Dominik. So when we are talking about the reconciliation methodology or talking about the whole topic of validation, we are basically having this divided here, what also completely makes sense from a project perspective to do a pre-handover, which is more on the migration partner side, and then coming to the handover in a second step. After the handover, having the validations or really the testing on the customer side, testing processes and so on. But starting after the migration is complete or the conversion is complete, we are going through this chain of different steps for all of our validation and starting really with the migration protocol. So everything which comes out of the tool, having about messages, different numbers, doing here really validations, if it fits to the previous test migrations, and seeing if the go live, if everything went smooth and as expected, or if we see any unexpected errors or any messages just from the tool perspective, which comes up, which we can directly then check there before we are starting with the technical validations. So once this is done, we are then talking about the comparison of different queries. So when we are comparing source and target system on the data side, checking significant tables, if it makes if we have the same numbers here and also the same counts and everything what we can check here. So for example, different selects, and if there is any difference, this needs to be explainable. Of course, we are also always talking about selective data migration, so it makes sense that there can be a difference in some areas, but it needs to be explainable, and in the whole context that makes sense. Having this covered, then we coming to the next point, which is the data consistency checks. So for example, foreign key check, what we are doing then directly in the target system, or different significant data relations in the data model, what makes sense to check if, for example, the business partner is available for different areas. So really doing consistency check in the target system after the migration, that everything is valid from the technical perspective. And then going a bit into direction already to the functional perspective. So talking about automated testing, which means we are doing some kind of a simulation of a transactional call, not on a real transactional level, but more like tool supported in a batch procedure. So still executing, for example, a batch number of significant objects where we are doing an opening, closing, and saving procedure, where we're seeing, okay, is there any error which comes up? Do an address not exist, for example, or a material number? And really doing that in a batch procedure to having here also this covered for a lot of objects. Then coming to the next step, going more into the functional direction, talking about the audit report checks. So preparing important audit report checks, for example, a balance comparison, where we're here preparing this one, already taking a look from a migration partner perspective, seeing if there's any difference, and if there's any difference, is it explainable? And of course, this goes afterwards to the customer as well for checking what we are seeing below there as well, in addition as audit report checks. But as a last step from the pre-handover, we still have the manual spot checks, and this is basically real on transactional level that we are picking, for example, important master data or important objects, opening the transaction, seeing it if everything looks consistent also on a transactional level. So having this handover, Dominik, what comes next then?
Yeah. Okay. So basically, I mean, the handover of the manual spot checks, it basically originates also already in the blueprinting phase, right? When together with the customer, we will find out or we'll determine what is also the test plan and what's also the test procedure, basically. And typically, customers do have recommendations or things that, this is what I typically would check. Like these are the documents. This is the particular master data that I want to check because I know it's critical. It has been critical in past system upgrades, for instance. And this is why it's on the table and on the spot, basically. So the manual spot checks really are something that is based on criticality typically. And then when the handover basically happens, what any SDT community member would already ensure is basically they would have this basic level of consistency already throughout the different layers, like Patrick just described, right? On the database layer, on the account level, to ensure that we have all the migration scope basically covered, on the application layer, even to the audit level, which is typically what your auditor would typically also look at. And Patrick rightly brought up the example of the balance sheet right here. Now, of course, after that, we will hand it over to the customer for checking because, I mean, seeing is believing, right? Not we want to basically customers want to see that stuff themselves. And typically the first thing that's being checked is exactly the audit reports. And what we see in projects very typically is that besides the, omnipresent balance sheet comparison and other P&L type of comparisons reports, there's typically also a lot of custom specific reporting that is typically being done. And that is many times it's inherited from regular procedures like system upgrades that they did in the past and so on and so forth. So these will typically be bound into the whole procedure, and that would also be like the proof point of checking right here. So that's like the first thing. At first glance, if you see that something is off here, there's something off somewhere down below, of course. If you already see that this is consistent at this level, there's a good level of trust already established that things are well also in the further things going on. Then typically customers would repeat the manual spot tests as well, basically looking at it from their perspective, and most of the time a little bit more comprehensive than it is done by purely the migration partner, because that is when basically an internal topic. And at this point, then typically the system is open up to what I personally call like destructive testing, and destructive in the way, I mean it in the way that now changes can actually happen to the system, right? Before we were really looking at data and comparing and making sure that the consistency is actually present and valid. Now, actually, we are really doing or the customer is really doing checks in the system that also imply creating new data, creating new cases, and so on and so forth, right? Starting all the way from functional tests, basically going over to interfaces, so basically up and downstream connected systems, all the way to integration tests, which then run end-to-end, and other test procedures, which basically follow up along. So overall, it's a very comprehensive and collaborative approach how a SDT migration partner interacts with a customer here to come to a complete result and come to a good fit, basically, in the end. Okay, that should hopefully shed a little bit of light on the reconciliation methodology. We do have one more chapter, and as I introduced at the very beginning, it's of imminent importance for most customers, is the topic of business continuity. And it comes in different, well, sizes, basically, but one of the sizes which is mentioned most of the time is the question about downtime and downtime optimization. So let me quickly go back to the slide here to support that. So obviously, as we just look at the slide, and it looks a little bit cluttered to think of, or to see at the very beginning, downtime and performance optimization obviously is a complex topic and has to incorporate many different factors. And maybe, Patrick, you want to walk us through some of these factors, and then talk also a little bit about how in SDT we address specific topics and how we all tackle a couple of those challenges here.
Yes, of course. Thanks, Dominik. So as Dominik already mentioned, this is quite a massive topic, which is not just from the pure data migration perspective. Of course, we have this here as well covered, but it goes all through the whole project. But let's take a look at the different aspects and go a bit through it. And we tried to divide it this year basically into 3 different blocks. Yeah. So really what we are seeing here on the left side is all the topics about hardware and the software itself. Then we are coming to our organizational part. And on the right side, of course, we see here everything which is around the data migration and the transformation itself. But first, starting on the left side, so really we are talking here not about any tool, any migration at all. So really the preparation from the infrastructure perspective, if we have in the SAP system enough application servers, that the network is running fine for the data migration at a later point of time, that we have enough CPU, so number of CPUs, we have enough memory, we have enough background processes. So really the whole infrastructure is well set up for the data migration. In addition here, not just about the hardware, but also about the software, that we have a well parameterized database and also the SAP system itself, then really having the correct setup for doing a data migration, which fits then into a very small downtime window. Coming to the middle part from the organizational perspective, here we really need to make sure that every resources which has different activities during a go live is available first of all, and also are being or is well prepared during a structured cutover planning. So everyone is aware of his task, has the availability, and which is also important, brings also some kind of a flexibility inside, because everyone which has already done a go live knows sometimes runs faster, sometimes runs slower. So really have a bit of flexibility and not losing time because someone is not available. So this is very important because every hour counts here. And of course, as a last but not least, we are talking about the whole transformation and data migration topic. So first of all, data volume is absolutely a factor here. So bringing just the data which is absolutely necessary to the target environment. Of course, always master data, but really thinking about what is necessary in my target environment really counts on the performance of the downtime, and also about the migration method which we are choosing, because in most of the cases, the table-based approach, due to high parallelization, is quite faster. So having here the correct migration method for my project requirements well set up, and having it chosen correctly, basically. As a next step, talking about the transformation complexity, so selection, but also the mapping part, that we are always aiming here to keep it as simple as possible, to also have tests available, and it is still understandable what the transformation is about, but choosing it here that also in a direction of downtime, picking here the correct things, everything what you want to do, but really everything which is necessary here. And also bringing tool-supported parallelization into the migration. And basically these are the different factors. But if everything is covered here, but the topic is still a challenge regarding the downtime, there are still further services like, for example, an NZDT approach or like separation of COD and whole data, which is then made individual for the different projects and really system dependent. What has really benefit here and what is the correct approach here. But Dominik, back to you. Maybe you can share with us some project experience.
Absolutely, absolutely. So from my own experience right now, well, 7 out of the top 10 projects that we do as a provider right now are actually NZD-driven projects, because the downtime requirements are basically within the hours or at least below a weekend downtime, basically. And these requirements typically with a large amount of, with large systems that nowadays we are seeing. So we easily today see many systems above 40, 50, 60 terabyte, I think even above 100 terabyte or so is possible. And I've seen personally, which of course then brings in the NZD technology. And just to like give a glimpse on how it basically works, to get an idea about the structure and what it basically does is that the migration actually already takes place in a near zero downtime approach while the source system is still up and running. And the way of how that basically works is that there is change recording on the source system going on that is basically, many times it's trigger based, where basically database triggers would record the keys that are basically being changed while the system is already being migrated. And they are basically put into a backlog, which is then offloaded in subsequent Delta migration. So basically you can imagine that during uptime, in let's say a week period of time or so, you're migrating the whole system. That is off the critical path already, right? And then basically subsequently, you're doing Delta, you're doing the Delta capture, you're doing the Delta changes basically, which then in the first Delta, you would only take the changes that accumulated over the course of the uptime migration. So let's say that 1 week. Naturally, that leaves for another Delta migration an even smaller window for, let's say, just like a day or two. And you can continue this basically up, you get to like a minimal point in time where now you will actually enter downtime, which is why it's called near zero downtime and not absolute downtime, absolutely no downtime. It's near zero downtime because then you're bringing the last changes over. And that really dramatically minimizes the downtime. Another factor that I personally see also in projects helping very much with the downtime is automation in the reconciliation part. We've been covering a couple of those things, but specifically in the audit reporting. I mean, you can imagine like putting the audit reports left and right and going over these things manually is tedious work, right? It's error prone, plus it takes a lot of time. With many of us, we have tooling available that automates the process, basically diffing the different artifacts and then showing and pinpointing to exactly where differences would be and giving hints about like, would they be explainable or not, basically. In this sense. So these are, for me, are basically 2 factors why I see, first of all, it's an increasing demand, systems get larger, customer downtime requirements get harder, basically. And on the other side, we basically cope with that by bringing in methodology on the one side with the NZDT approach, and on the other side, of course, with tooling and automation to cut down on downtime even further. I don't know, Stefano, whether there's any experience that you want to share from your side on this particular topic.
Yeah, I think, I mean, you and Patrick said a lot. I just want to highlight the importance of what happening after the migration. Yeah, of course, I think all of us have incremental approaches, and as described by Patrick, there are many ways to reduce the downtime. It's also very important that all the processes outside of the migration are automated. Like, for example, the business validation just mentioned, but also, for example, the shutdown and the ramp up of the system. Everything must be tested and optimized. You just remember, if you do a lion run together with someone and you want to be the faster one, you have to run everybody in good shape. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, Stefano, thank you very much. I think that that's it from a content perspective. I think we also got a lot of questions, some of which have been answered already in the call. I don't know, Krenar, whether you want to take it back and walk us through the questions and open it up for answering live.
Sure. Thank you again for the very exciting session. So indeed, we had some questions. I see that all of them have been answered. Don't know if you want to deep dive in some questions. For example, how does shell conversion fit to the clean core? I see, Patrick, that you have answered it, but maybe to more generalize the answer, if there's something we can add on to that.
Let me look for the question.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't see it right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically the question was, how does shell conversion fit to clean core concept? So what is important to understand here from the shell creation perspective, so that the shell do not touch, or the shell creation itself, independent what tool you are picking or partner, that it's not touching the repository or the customizing. So after the shell creation is done, you get rid basically of your application data, except of course, for example, user master, so you can still log on, for example, but you are free then to do any customizing, change, or repository data. But the shell itself, from a pure shell creation, is do not touching it in any area. So not sure if you want to add something, Dominik or Stefano, about the topic.
I can add it. So operational point of view is very similar to what happened during the system conversion. So the methodology by design is not, if you go for shell creation, is not helping to speed up the clean core, but you are basically splitting the maintenance in the S/4HANA world with the maintenance in the SEC world. So you can then take the opportunity to remove a lot of custom code at the moment of the transition. That, by the way, will be a moment where your user will experience change management. You can then combine these things in one project. In terms of design, if you start from a shell, you have the same activity like you do in the system conversion. The advantage is that you are working in the SEC world. In one side, you continue with your normal maintenance, and on the other side, you have a new instance where you can work and create your new environment and get cleaner, let's say, and going live at the same moment with the S/4HANA and with the new repository, that probably, hopefully, will be cleaner than before.
Okay. So that in the meanwhile, we have quite some other questions in the chat. So I would just start from the top. What are the prerequisites for opting for table-based or posting-based approach?
May I take that? So they're not really like prerequisites, at least from a table-based approach, there are much less prerequisites basically. So SDT is basically also famous for inlining many of the pre-projects, which typically would have to be done when you talk about the system conversion. So for instance, if you think about having to introduce CVI before or going on new GL before, that is something, unless of course you're already there, is something that an SDT approach can basically tackle on the fly together with the migration. Is it always advisable to do it? Not necessarily, but it's of course then doable. So in terms of what the prerequisites basically are, SDT, I think, has the beauty overall to be able to introduce not only, we always say like we can combine multiple projects into one, which would otherwise be spread out on the timeline, typically, like this preparation project, basically. But also, I personally see a lot of customers which also like want to do more, basically, with their migration into S4. They want to do a standardization, which is also then possible, also something which is out of the scope of a typical conversion project, for instance. If on the other side, we're talking about a posting-based approach, right? This is typically chosen in an open items and balances type of way, which, by the way, many times is actually even combined together with a table-based approach. We had a couple of examples earlier where master data and application data can actually be split and can also be done by specific business units. If like one migration approach is applicable for one and the other is basically for the other. So again, the beauty of SDT is basically that it gives you all the options and all the flexibility to cater to a project that really enables you, if you're talking from an IT perspective, to become an enabler of the business. Get the power of S/4HANA on private cloud right away, and not only a couple of projects basically down the road when you're finally realizing the value.
Okay. The other question, hi, SDT is possible via DMLT team and approved partners, or can customer data team also try to set up SDT data team and follow these processes for data migration?
Patrick, want to take it or should I take it?
Yes, please start, Stefano. I can
Okay,
add
so
something. Yeah.
I mean, to run an SDT project, you probably need a specific tool, but we have a question later on about specific tools. And you also need specific competences. I would recommend to connect with one of the members of the community if you want to do an SDT project, to at least understand the complexity of your case. In general, at the moment, I would say no customer cannot set up an SDT team and run a project by their own without having experience in table-based migration.
Yes, so I completely agree with this one. So everyone, every member of the SDT community brings their own tool with all the expertise and requirements and different competencies. So it's not that easy to tackle a whole SDT. So because of this, we are here as SDT community to support you and help you with your products, and as well with all of the tools we provide you here. Yeah.
Okay. The other question is related to that. Discussions with SAP has indicated that they will be releasing their own SDT capabilities in their BTC solution. How will the SDT providers utilize this technology? Secondly, SAP is steering away from direct table loads. Do you foresee this eliminating option 1 direct table loads for historical data?
So from my perspective, BTC has a...
Your audio.
Yeah.
Okay, then maybe it's coming back again?
No.
No, then somebody else will probably try. And I chime in later. Okay, I'll try it again.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm audible now. Okay.
Yeah.
Funny thing. So BTC is good for many particular use cases, right? And the level of capabilities that's there is something that we all as SDT members basically embrace.
Yeah, you're mute again.
Audio is gone again.
I'm sorry. Give me a second. I'm very sorry for that.
Yep.
That didn't happen.
No better.
Dry run. Sorry. Time.
Okay, we seem to have their audio issues with Dominik. I don't know, Stefano or Patrick, if you can cover it.
I can take it. So BTC is it can be used as a specific use cases. Is at the moment covering part of the requirement. Is the migration tool is for is available in ALM, and if you have a license, you can use it. Is a describer migration methodology. The SDT project is a little bit much more than just the migration part. So the BTC tool can be used for the migration part, but it's not an holistic solution for an SDT project. So for example, you need to do the share creation out of the tool. So you need to consider these aspects if you have enough experience to run an SDT project or not. BTC can speed up the implementation and can reduce the cost of the implementation. It can provide you a very fast way to do the scoping and execute the migration, and is offering a package of solutions, like, for example, a package of selection criteria. If you have very specific requirements, maybe this will not fulfill, and you need to connect with one of the SDT community. From the usage of the community, every partner has a different strategy. In SAP, of course, we would use BTC when it will make sense. So that's the answer from SAP side. So when the requirement will fulfill, BTC will likely be used. For partner, they have every partner has its own strategy. Maybe Dominik or Patrick, they want to say something.
Yeah. So basically, I hope I'm audible now in the meantime again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, hopefully stays on. Yeah. So we embrace BTC as well for specific use cases. But Stefano, as you said, basically, we also see many projects that basically come out of the current capabilities of BTC at this point, and where a more holistic approach is basically taken. So we are considering that basically on a case-by-case basis, and of course always try to advise the customer for what is actually the best tooling approach and also the best approach for their overall goals that they're trying to achieve.
Okay, let's jump to the next question. Is the transition approach also applicable for S4 on-premise to S4 private cloud, more or less greenfield?
Yes, I can take it if you want. Yeah. All good. Okay. So first of all, thanks for the question. This is a good one. So we have spoken a lot about ECC to S/4HANA, but first of all, of course, it's relevant for S/4HANA on-premise and S/4HANA private cloud migration, but also if you're talking about coming from an S4 system to an S4 system. So it's not just SDT covering ECC to S/4HANA, but as well S4 to S4, both on-premise and private cloud. Yeah, so I can say to this question, absolutely yes. Yeah. Of course, you have similarities and some differences because you're not talking about an ECC anymore, but the answer is yes.
Yeah. I can just plus one on that, basically, right? I mean, SDT really also has a background outside of the ECC to S4 private cloud transition, right? So it's applicable also later on in system consolidation scenarios, in harmonization scenarios, and so on and so forth. So basically, any type of organizational change that you want to do is not only supported within the move, but of course also after the move. It's a flexible tool set and a flexible methodology that can be applied to all sorts of type of transitions that you want to do organizationally, not just for the modernization parts.
Okay. How long does a typical SDT project take? Example, we have to migrate 4 to 5 company data.
It's a very difficult question. It's very depending about the requirement. So if you suppose you're not a big system and you take over only the 4 or 5 company code, you need to move it pure brownfield, your system is more or less ready. Suppose you are ready for a system conversion, but you want just to move 4 or 5 company code of your system. So that would be a perfect example for BTC case. That probably will take around 6 months. But typical project that we are looking in our environment have a higher complexity. Also, when we migrate some company code, we always to take some on-the-fly solution, and we may need a detailed scoping phase, and it's taking more or less 1 year. It's very depending case by case.
Can you choose to only migrate using DMC in a SDT solution?
DMC is data migration cockpit, I suppose. Yeah. Well,
yes.
I can take it. Yeah. So DMC is usually used for greenfield. However, for extreme mix and match, sometimes it happened that we do some specific SDT processes to build a new instance, and then we move the data via migration cockpit. But I would say this is a very low end of SDT project. Typically, SDT is chosen because we can move historical data. But there are a few cases where we do a mix between a new implementation and the shell, and that we use our tools to do that. And then we move all open item and only open item and master data.
Yes, I can only agree to that one. So the SDT approach, what we are thinking about with all the tool support we have here, there are sometimes where it might make sense to bring also migration cockpit on the table as for some of the objects as alternative, let's say, or doing some kind of combination. But in general, we are talking here about much more flexibility, what we can do here. table-based approach, the posting engine-based approach, and also sometimes migration approach, but it really depends on the project and the customer. And yeah, having here, as said, the full flexibility of every option we can take. Yeah.
All right. So then we have two more questions. Is it true the empty shell contains repository objects and cross-client customizing? It does not contain client-specific customizing.
Yes, I take the
True or not true?
I take the question. So maybe the visualization, or maybe also my sentence to it was not clear. Sorry for that. But independent if it's cross-client customizing or client-specific customizing, every customizing stays in the system. So when we are talking about the shell creation, the application data is basically deleted or erased or not there in the shell, but the customizing independent of client or not client stays. Yeah.
Hey, then we come to the last question. Is it possible to migrate first one or a subset of company codes from ECC to S4 and to migrate another subset of company codes to S4 in a second moment?
Yeah,
Or the second step, I guess.
maybe I take that, Krenar. So absolutely, that's
Yeah.
absolutely possible. So one of the largest projects we're currently running as one of the providers here is basically a multi-year program. I think it's a six-year program that we're having, accumulating to an overall amount of 500 company codes. And basically every year we started off easy with a couple of company codes, couple of dozen company codes in the first wave. And then in the second wave, basically we added up like to 50, then to 100 and so on and so forth. So yeah, that's absolutely possible. And specifically for larger corporations and larger programs, it's actually a common theme to think about a wave-based migration versus a big bang, which exactly would be featuring what you were asking for.
Okay, that was actually the last question. So quite a lot of questions. Anyone in the chat has another questions? Now that's your time to post it or to raise your hand. Okay. Well, we are also on the top of the hour. So thank you a lot, Dominik, Patrick, and Stefano. Very insightful session indeed. So thank you again for that. We will share the recording, we will share the slides and also the context to our from the speakers today. And we all will see us next week in the last session of this year, shortly before Christmas. So thank you all for joining today's session and really looking forward in seeing you next week to our last week's to our last year's session. So get excited for next week and thank you all. Have a very nice day. Have a very nice rest of the week and talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.